Hello everyone, my name is D3Damage/Momo. Thank you for watching my PowerPoint presentation of what I got wrong for Open Aries. I know we're a couple weeks late, but hey, bear with me here. First and foremost, I want to talk about how I personally did. I would say I did pretty good. I'm very proud of my girls. They did a phenomenal job of keeping my win rate pretty high. 87.5% in Open is very respectable. Now, unfortunately, I did get second place in the finals, mostly due to bad luck. Like, if you had to construct a scenario where I lose, this was it. Taking the lead didn't proc one of my girls. All of my girls got a late start. I was running triple front, so that many late starts is quite bad. Somehow, my air groove still got in front without proccing her ult. So that was everything that could have gone wrong did go wrong. And even then, we still got second place. So I'm actually really happy with how they performed, even if I'm a little disappointed. It is what it is. That being said, I'm quite happy with how the free time I opened up by playing Open Islami and like keep up in team trials, so that's nice. But we gotta talk about what this video is for. This video is not a, I'm not trying to get after anybody. I'm not trying to say that anyone's stupid. I'm just trying to say, like, that there are always lessons you can learn by actually watching your races and not just pressing the skip button every 30 seconds, like some people do. So I want to try and learn what I can by observing these so that we can think about what to do in the future, right? And we can think about like what flaws different strategies have and how everything kind of worked out. And I will say strategy versus Uma. The last What I Got Wrong video was very focused on Uma because in a lot of ways it was individual Uma that really stood out as like going above and beyond or not doing what they should. This time around though, so much of the scene was actually dominated by a very rock paper scissors interaction between different groups of strategies. Right? Which Uma you had in which particular strategy didn't really seem to matter so much as what strategy were you using and how did that strategy match up into other people's strategies. It was very interesting. It was a lot like it reminded me more of playing Magic the Gathering than it did of normal Uma like CMs. And I was actually very excited about that. As always, I kind of wish that like there was more interaction in CMs or that there was like more of a direct way that you could talk to other people during the CM, but it is what it is. So, first off, let's talk with the various things we got going on here, the strategies we have. So first off, we have the double Domineer strategy, which was the dominant strategy of the CM, and the one you were probably most likely to lose to if you brought in no strategy at all. If you didn't have a plan, and you were just bringing in random good stuff Uma, this is probably the strategy you lost to. Next most common was the triple fronts setup. Triple front was very, very strong with CM. In particular, certain types of triple front were very powerful against double domineers, while other types were very powerful against late surgers. And some were dedicated to being other triple fronts. This group in particular was very dynamic. There was a lot of things you could see happen, and like what happened in each individual race sometimes came up to luck, which was a little rough. And then last but not least, you had the hard gamblers, the triple lates or the double late domineers, right? As a rule, your triple lates would beat out certain types of frontrunners and would beat most versions of the Domineer builds. Domineer builds would lose to certain types of frontrunners and some types of late surges. And triple fronts were, again, depending on what type of triple front you ran, would depend a lot on how you dealt with these two strategies here. We're going to talk more about that in a little bit when we get to the triple front section. But let's start off with the big one, right? Double Domineer. You'll notice I'm saying double Domineer and not double Domineer Aguri. Well, that's because we'll go over this more in the Christmas Aguri section. I have set aside a specific Christmas Aguri section for us, right? But the win rate of double Domineer teams was basically the same as Xmas Aguri double Domineer teams. In fact, some double Domineer teams even had a higher win rate than whatever random Aguri that I ran into, which I found fascinating. If I'm being specific, I even personally lost to a Satano Diamond double Dominator, right? Which is fascinating to me. It turns out double Domineer is just incredibly strong on medium CMs. Who knew? It turns out nuking your opponent and breaking their legs is a really great strategy for making you win the race. Now, it has its flaws, namely, one of the things to look at here is that, like, many people relied exclusively on Christmas Aguri to be their primary ace, but it turns out that might have been wrong. There were some things that Christmas Aguri does do that other aces don't do, but in some ways, because she's so reliant on wit checks in order to do anything with her ult, and specifically wit checks on white stamina recovery skills, there were actually a lot of scenarios where if you had just taken a different ace, you would have had better results. There are a lot of like late race velocity Uma that actually would have performed better. There's also like mid race competition Uma that could have done the job better. Like part of what made Crystal Zaduri unique is that like she's kind of position agnostic with how strong she is, right? This is definitely Aduri's like strongest CM. It's gonna be her strongest CM for a while, right? But even then, the power of double dominators was actually real. And what you need to think about is that like a 25% speed decrease to all enemy girls in front of you when you're running like double late surge or dominators or even double end closer dominators, right? That's a lot of Uma. That's a lot of Uma that just don't get to play the game for like 3 to 6 seconds at a time. And they do stack, right? Like there is definitely like observable like, oh, that girl had her legs broken. Now, there were, again, counters to this build. We're going to go over those counters later. But there were a lot of times where, like, you could just out-accelerate this or just be around the corner and out of vision, and you would be just fine. Now, why would any other Uma work? Well, here's just a small sampling of Uma that I saw people using double dominators with, right? I saw Satono Diamond. Again, that's specifically, Satono Diamond is specifically the Uma that I lost to in the finale. I saw a double Diamond Daiwa Scarlet, double Diamond Halloween Shower. I even saw a double Dominator with an end closer Golshi, which I thought was pretty funny. I wasn't really expecting that one at all. But hey, she had a good win rate, so I can't make fun of it too much. Now, how else do I want to say this? We're going to talk more about this strategy later, because it comes up a lot in the conversation with other groups, but suffice to say, this was the single strategy that you saw the most of, right? Like, if I had to list a single strategy that, like, everyone had, this was probably it. I want to say at least once per, I wouldn't know. That's not right. I wouldn't say once per race, but that's not quite right. It's more like 2 or 3 times per ticket I would run into this specific strategy with random Oshi Uma plus double Dominator. And their win rates were incredibly consistent across the board. So that's something that's very interesting to me, and I kind of wish I had more data on that one. But again, I'm the only person that's doing these studies, which makes, like, understanding more of what's happening a little bit difficult. But if I had to guess, we'll talk, no, we'll talk about more in the Christmas Story second. First off, we gotta talk about the kings of the CM, the triple front, wake up king, the front needs you. Oh, it's so good. Alright, so what you need to know about this strategy is there's actually 2 strategies in one here, right? Broadly speaking, there were 2 types of front strategies, or triple front strategies. There was the left side here, which was the brawler front strategy, and then the right side over here, which is the acceleration gambly front. If I get first, I win strats, right? Now, first off, let's talk about the if I go first, I win. I kind of briefly discussed it in our CM prep video, right, for Aries Cup. Sand Sky is the demon of the CM if she ever gets her ult. But that's kind of the thing. You just kind of don't, right? I did lose to a Sand Sky once or twice. She is quite strong if everything goes her way. But that's kind of the problem. Everything has to go her way, right? In open, you don't have a lot of spare points to put into random mid-range skills. So a lot of the times, like, you would take groundwork, you would take your greens, you would take, and then you would get, like, enough points for, like, 1 or 2, like, inherited skills or a single random velocity skill. You didn't have the points to invest into a tail-held high build, right? There just wasn't enough room for it. And that's something that is very powerful in graded, but again, in open, you just don't have the room for it. This is part of why this build tended to include other high-roll gamblers. Other high-roll gamblers meaning things like Daiwa Scarlet. Daiwa Scarlet's ult can do a pretty good job of pretending to be Sand Sky ult if it procs at the right time. You also have things like Redshift Monozensky. Yes, I know Redshift Monozensky. She was good last CM. Don't let other people lie to you, right? She did pull wins. I ended up not running one because I found a strategy that I liked better because I felt it was more consistent. But in particular, if you had a Redshift Monozensky, you basically never lost to a Dominator build, right? Because the way that it would work out is that the Dominators would do their thing, you would get slowed down, and then Redshift Monozensky would hit her Excel and just take off anyways, right? Like, it turns out, if you've been slowed by a Dominator, Redshift just does not care. which meant that she had a lot of wiggle room. Also, again, if they were running double Dominator setups, the Sans die could sometimes just take off because the double Dominators didn't have a frontrunner to deny positioning with, so the Sans die would just fly. Other notable Uma on this strategy includes Silent Suzuka, both the runaway and non-runaway versions. Yes, I'm serious. We'll talk more about that later. And then Mayana Top Gun, of all people. I think that Mayana Top Gun was mostly just like you're already in front, and then you hit a late race velocity, because that's really what her ult was. This CM, a late race velocity, not an accelerator, like it sometimes could be. So I thought that was pretty fun, and I do think the strategy was pretty cool. But again, it had problems. You'll notice I keep saying this word over and over again, if. If you're in front, Sans die wins. Well, why is it an if? It's an if because of the brawler fronts. There were some very powerful fronts who are very good at fighting for the first place in the mid-race, despite the fact that they don't have access to a lot of other outside mid-race skills out, right? They just have taken the lead, groundwork, and then a bunch of greens, right? Those were Valentine Bourbon and Summer Mata Zensky. Those were the two specific ones. Now, unlike with the last group of gambling fronts could really be any frontrunner as long as you have them in moderation. But the microsecond that you include either of these two, you quickly realize that they would take over from your other frontrunners and make your other frontrunners lose all the time. They were a little too good at fighting for the front, and so the minute that you include Summer Mata Zensky or Valentine Bourbon into your comp, you were making a decision that you were going to win that CM by brawling and fighting off every other front in the game. But this actually led to a problem. Who do you fit into the third slot? Because there isn't a convenient Uma to put here, right? Like, think about most frontrunners. Like, Sans die, she probably just loses the dogfight and now doesn't have an ult and she's just a dead Uma. Either of these three, Daiwa Starlet, KSM Black, Smart Falcon, all three of them can only function in first or second place. The microsecond that they're in third, you've turned them off. And again, these two are so good at fighting for the front that you could have just generally assumed that like every other like frontrunner was just not going to make it. So who did that leave? Well, you could do things like Sakura Bakushino, because she does have a first through third clause in hers, which is pretty good for a frontrunner in this comp. But she's also got medium G, so that meant that she had to like rely on hitting that medium spark multiple times in a run, which is pretty tough, right? Especially in open, where like the whole goal of playing open is to save a little bit of time and to be relaxed. So not being able to do that is a little troll. You can also run a Guri Cap. Now a Guri Cap going from F to B is a little tough, right? It's not the greatest. But at the same time, you don't really need her to have front A, right? Front B is actually okay a lot of the time, especially on a Guri Cap, because her width is going to be so much higher than everyone else in the lobby, right? So in some ways, I think Christmas and Guri Cap actually would have made a great third front. I kind of wish I thought of it sooner, like, because you're going to be in the second through fourth, which that you need for Uma. Gosh darn it, I should have made a Guri front. Dang it. Oh well, next time. I saw a lot of people that said, fuck it, we ball, and decided to give up on the triple front entirely, and what they chose to do instead was to do double front plus a random late surge or end closer. Golshi was particularly popular in this role, because of course she was, and at that point, though, what some people said was like, you know what, no, I'm going to rely on my fronts to win, but I'm just going to throw in a Dominator. That was usually Grass Wonder, because Grass Wonder also has an easy time being an end closer, but if you had, like, one of the fancy ones, like Rudolph, right, you would sometimes run Rudolph as, like, a hybrid ace, because, like, hey, she can win sometimes, right? And, you know, that was a lot of times good enough. And so, we'll talk more about, like, this third slot problem later, but there is one Uma in particular that I settled on that worked out really, really well for the most part. Now for the last typing. So, triple backliners. A lot of the time, this was your Oshi, or Dober plus Ryan and a Dominator, or Dober plus Ryan and a random Oshi. This was probably the second rarest grouping of the CM. There's one grouping that I just didn't see at all that I predicted would be good, and that I don't have any data for it. Like, no one that I played with ran into it, and no one that I talked to has data on it, and I never saw one. So that last group is just is going to have to remain a mystery for now. We'll talk about it later. But there were a lot of good backliners this CM. In fact, a lot of my losses were not to a Guri Cap specifically, but rather to random backliners. some backliners were definitely stronger than others, I will say that much. I never lost to a Symboli Rudolph, but there were a couple of Symboli Rudolphs that had very, very good win rates in this setup that were not running Dominator, that were just running themselves as pure aces, and they kicked some ass, right? In general, this build was a little bit more gambly, right? Like, it would lose to any, like, gambly fronts if there weren't other frontrunners to stop those gambly fronts from taking the lead. It would also lose to certain, like, if it got unlucky, it would also lose to the triple fronts, like the brawly fronts. And it definitely actually beat Dominators a lot of the time. The double Dominator comp actually struggled a lot versus these. I think in no small part because Dominator relies on nuking people who are in front of you. That means that they rely on having their nuke go off, which means they usually rely on having a very high wit score. Having a very high wit score often drives you to the front of a pack, and so a lot of the times what I would see happen is that the really high wit late surgers would fly to the front in the mid race, right? And then they would do their Dominator at the start of the late race, and then whoever was in 6th place would run past them, is what I saw happen a lot of the time, right? So there were actually a lot of scenarios where I think triple backlands was a lot better than people give it credit for, and part of me wishes I read it too, but I just don't like Dober enough, but that's because I also haven't done her campaign yet, because I just got her, okay, guys, and I didn't have time to do her. I like reading people's stories, okay, so, like, I like having the time to read, and I did not have the time to read. It is what it is. Now, let's talk about, like, performance and overall of, like, individual Uma at this point. So, again, I do think strategy is a much higher role and thought process this CM compared to last, but we can't always analyze a win rate strategy, the win rate of a strategy, as much as we can understand the win rate of a specific Uma. So we gotta talk at least a little bit about what underperforming is, even, right? Obviously, as a rule, you're an open. You can kind of run whatever you want to, as long as you have the right set of base kit, right? If you're running, like, any random medium Uma, you're probably going to do fine. If you're running someone who has, like, medium G, okay, well, it takes a little bit of work to get her there, but once you have the medium A, you'll probably do fine. That's just kind of the type of CM that this was. Everyone had a chance of winning if they were in the right team comp, and I thought that was pretty cool. Everyone could be an all-star, right? But, as always, we have to talk about the Golshi Matrix. So, if you didn't know, in Open, there's a specific Uma that's always good. It doesn't matter what race distance you're on, it doesn't matter what's happening in the CM, it doesn't even matter, like, if you expect to win. The single best Uma, basically every CM, is Gold Chip in Open. Why? Well, in Open, you can't really take mid-race skills to scam her out of position, or to get too much of a lead where she can't catch up to you. She's also an end closer. She has the best speed modifier in the game. And so having an ult that basically procs because no one else has a mid-race skills, and you're always guaranteed to have a good mid-race, and then having an ult that also guarantees that you move up in position, while also being in the positional, the end closer positional that gives you the most speed, it just gives you so many wins, right? As a rule, any individual Uma contributes to a 33% win rate as a team. This is just logic, and it's also backed up by some data. But basically, your average person has a sub 33% win rate, and your average, like, Oshi Uma enjoyer that, like, watches the graded infomercials super religiously has, like, a 67 or better % win rate, and so it all kind of balances out so that, like, on average, you expect to win about 1 in 3 games unless you've done really overperforming. So what tends, unless you have Golshi. Golshi, because she's so good in Open, has a 33% win rate as a base, even if she's garbage. Any random Golshi that you bring into any CM is going to do well. That's just the way that it is. I don't make the rules. Golshi herself will often do better as a solo Uma than entire teams will, and this CM was no exception. There were people who, like, they had Golshis that had, like, no recoveries, with, like, 400 stamina that, like, still were pulling wins. They had Golshis that, like, had literally 500 speed, but were still winning, right? Like, I can't overstate enough how good Golshi is in Open CMs right now. Her dominance will probably wane a little bit once we get into the A+ territory, and it's a little bit easier to squeeze in mid-race skills and, like, better and more consistent excels into the races. But take it for granted, Golshi's probably still going to be very, very good every CM. So our base metric for any other Uma has to be they need to get a better than 33% win rate, because they need to be doing better than your average team as a single Uma, because they need to be doing better than Golshi. Alright, you understand the logic, right? Again, but gotta be better than Golshi, gotta be better than people's teams. And again, how do we get this data? We can't use any data from round 1, basically. Basically, every data point from round 1 is useless, okay? Uh, it's not impressive to have a 100% win rate with only 5 races. That's more than likely just random dice odds, right? Versus in Group A of round 2, I'll have a very good idea of how good your Uma actually was, because by that point you'll have done like 80-something races. And even if you didn't do those 80 races, and if you're only at like 15 or 20, you have still made the choice to switch to that Uma after going through multiple days of CMs and testing out how stuff works. So you'll have a much stronger idea of what is actually good by the time you get to the end of the CM. And as always, I'm not really looking at people who like they're bringing something in that really shouldn't be there, like Haru Urara. Right, Haru is basically not a CM Uma. She is a Uma that you run because you love her. Right, she is a super duper hard Oshi pick. OG Haru's ult is quite bad. Her timing is awful, and she has pretty bad affinities. And she also has terrible she doesn't have medium A. She has like medium G. So she was a pretty tough Uma to run. But there are people that brought her and stuff like her. Right, and so if you're bringing an Uma that shouldn't be there, a lot of times they'll have a pretty pitiful win rate. Right. Especially if you didn't do anything to like stat them up, so we kind of ignore those Uma. Alright, so let's talk about the first set of winners, right? Like the first set of like really good Uma that kind of overperformed. It is Sakura Chiyono O and Satono Diamond. So this is the specific one that I lost to at the end of the CM. I want to point out, she's actually a lot slower than my Uma. Oh wait, maybe she's not, because she has Medium S, Turf S, and Right-Handed Demon. It completely slipped my mind that Satono Diamond has Right-Handed Demon, and it also slipped my mind that Sakura Chiyono O has Spring Spectacle. So it slipped my mind that there are Uma that have better greens than normal. So I want everyone to remember how important greens are in Open. They're basically always hyper efficient. Part of why I didn't include Right-Handed Demon or other things like that in my own personal calculations of what would be good is because, well, while most greens are efficient, the golden greens really aren't. They're quite expensive, right? In terms of like what they cost you in a CM. You're looking at like more than double the cost of getting any like double circle green still. Right-Handed Demon costs a good 230 plus more than right-handed double circle does. But it's still really good, it turns out. It's still, like, it turns out that even though they are more expensive, they're still in the, like, the ballpark. Like, once you start hitting, like, 800 or so in a stat, even that extra cost is still cheaper than what it would have cost if you had done things differently. Now, this one was not particularly efficient, but hey, who cares? She got extra power that she normally wouldn't have. So she says 717 power, but she's actually closer to, like, 850 to 900 power after Turf S, right? So this is a very, very scary Uma that's like kind of hidden, and she'll always be that way. And then you can just pair this Uma up with like a double Dominator comp, or with like a single Dominator, and then like Sakura Chiyono O if you're not that lucky, right? And you can get a pretty solid win rate off of, well, frankly, just doing what you do. Now I will say, this win rate as a solo Uma wasn't quite as good as any individual strategy. Again, the strategies were the real core of the CM, not individual Uma, but still, Satono Diamond way overperformed. However, if I had to say one Uma that said, fuck it, strategy, I'll just win, nerd, that's Tomomo Cross. I've talked about Tomomo Cross before in, like, private circles, where someone will try and sell me that Tomomo Cross is not that good. And I'll look at them and go, but Tail 9 is a thing, and her ult is just a better Golshi ult, and people will laugh me out of the room. But it turns out I'm just right. As always, I'm just right. I got the Open GOAT title for a reason, y'all. Tomomo Cross basically just has Golshi ult, except that it also has an acceleration component. That's important because even if you get no carryover, which you did on Tomomo Cross, by the way, it was fairly routine for Tomomo Cross to pick up some carryover on this particular CM. One of the things that happened all the frickin' time with her is that you would get your ult and she just moves farther. than Golshi does, because the acceleration component allows her to take advantage of her increased target speed a lot better, so she can cover more ground in a shorter time frame, and so she just gets to do what Golshi does, but really, really well. There was more than one Tomomo Cross that, like, didn't have anything other than their ults. This is one of them, and she just has a really casual 53% win rate. She's literally a stat stick and an ult, and she's winning, guys. She's winning more than your average team. This is a pretty crazy Uba, and she's not alone. I ended up going, what was it? I think I had 8, 9 losses this CM, maybe 10 if I count the finale, maybe, because let's take, anyways. Of those, fully 3 were to just Tomomo Cross. They had no backup either. Like, they weren't part of a comp, they weren't part of a late surge comp, they weren't part of, like, a double dominator. In some ways, I think she would be a very strong candidate for the secret best Uma of the CM that was just never sung about because, oh, look, my Aguri cap is really good. Right? Alright. But my current vote, though, for the Uma that takes the cake is actually Summer Malazensky. And I think this is in stark contrast to what happened in Graded, right? In Graded, Valentine Bourbon was absolutely the Uma that dominated the Brawl Front comp. In the Brawl Front, Valentine Bourbon in Graded was the superior Uma. But there's something that happens in Open that doesn't happen in Graded. In Open, you can't take all of Bourbon's good mid-race skills, and you can't take concentration. It's too expensive, because you need 3 greens, you need angling and steaming, and you need groundwork. Now, if I were to look at the 2 builds for my Valentine Bourbon and my Summer Malazensky, they're basically exactly the same. Except that Valentine Bourbon has extra mid-race skills because she doesn't have 777, and she has some other velocity skill. I think I gave her, like, Eternal Moments or something, right? We'll talk more about that later. And despite the fact that, like, they're basically the exact same build, my Valentine Bourbon had, like, less than a third of the win rate that my Summer Malazensky did. And you might go, okay, well, how? If they have the exact same build in a very similar stat line, okay, and I'll be frank with you, Valentine Bourbon was faster with a higher power than my Summer Malazensky was. Like, what happened? Why is Summer Malazensky so much stronger? It's taking the lead. It's on here for a reason, okay, y'all? Hopefully y'all saw it before I mentioned it. Taking the lead is just an incredible skill that it gives you such a huge burst of acceleration in the early race that having it and groundwork go off just means you won that race. That's how strong taking the lead plus groundwork was. And it turns out Valentine Bourbon can't get taking the lead very easily. The only way to get it is by borrowing someone's Twin Turbo card, and let's be frank, you're not using Twin Turbo. Twin Turbo is such a gambly card, right? Because it has a super high odds. I think it's something like 75% of the time you're just not going to get all the way to the end. And even then, it doesn't guarantee taking the lead. It only gives you a chance at taking the lead. So again, the whole goal of Open is to do things in the way that, like, saves you time. So no one took Twin Turbo at all, unless they had, like, an MLB one maybe. And even then, right? Because it was so hard to get taking the lead onto Valentine Bourbon, I never bothered. And it turns out that Summer Malazensky just fights better at that point, right? Because she's also taking Operation Cacao, because Operation Cacao is really, really great at helping you fight for the mid-race. And even as an inherited skill, it also counts as recovery, so it gave Summer Malazensky another opportunity to proc her ult at a good timing that helped her fight for the first place position before the late race. So she ended up being a really incredible Uma, especially in the double brawl, the triple or double brawl comps. She was absolutely a menace. Now, there's one thing we don't have this CM, and that is a clear number 1 or a clear set of losers. It turns out that, like, no one that I thought would win really did terrible this CM. Again, it's kind of a mark of how good Triple Dominator was. Or, sorry, Double Dominator was. Because Double Dominator was just so powerful that it really didn't matter that your Oshi wasn't ideal. The Double Dominator would let her win. Which is where we transitioned into, because there were no bad Uma, we have to talk about some of the weird jank that happened this CM, the weird nonsense. We gotta talk about what happened to Crystal Sunuri, why I chose to run Wedding Air Groove as a frontrunner this CM. Runaway Suzuka And the single biggest loser of the comps that I suspected on, where the hell was Triple Dominator? Alright, so Crystal Zaguri. So she is strong. Please don't let me like bury the lead and say she wasn't strong. She is, right? If her ult goes off, she has a very high chance of winning. In fact, if you look at that 68% win rate, it's pretty good. That's pretty good Uma. And you might go, wait, but that's higher than Summer Monozinsti. Why didn't your this Uma here get the first place slot? Well, that's because this is the same win rate as any random double dominator might have. It turned out that double dominator was so strong that it didn't really matter what Uma he ran with it. You had a pretty good odds of just having a win rate in the 60 to 70% range just by virtue of bringing your two dominators. So even though Crystal Zaguri was strong, she wasn't super special in this regard. She wasn't a major contributing factor to explosive win rates. Also, notably, because you were running double dominators and they probably weren't hybrid dominators, they were probably like full debuffers, right? You had no other source of winning. It's worth noting that the Summoner Monozinsti that I had a second ago, right? This Summoner Monozinsti, she had a 56% win rate, but contributed to an 87.5% win rate as a team, right? This is the team's entire set of wins when you run Crystal Zaguri on a double dominator comp. And when you run Crystal Zaguri without the double dominator comp, she tends to have a win rate in like the 30s to 40s, right? So she's just not that good. Now we have to talk about like, well, how do you know she wasn't that good? What if you're just wrong? Well, here's what happens in a CM. We gotta talk about El Condor Pasa in the Mile CM, so like the third Mile CM, right? El Condor Pasa was not on anyone's radar in Open. All right, in Open, no one took her the round 1 day 1. You didn't see her. Round 1 day 2 though, she started to show up a little bit, and they were starting to post wins. And I even lost once, and I was like, huh, that's kind of weird. Like, you gotta know, in Taurus Cup and Gemini Cup, I was used to being basically undefeated. So losing at all was very strange in the Mile Cup. I was like, huh, okay, well, I'm sure that was a fluke. Then come round 2, day 1, and suddenly they were everywhere. What everyone kind of realized after a little bit is that, yes, her ult procs a little bit into the late race, so it's a little bit late, but who cares? It's still a velocity and acceleration component ult that procs at a very, very good timing. So she went from being this random Uma that no one cared about to being the dominant Uma of the CM back in that Mile CM. Cancer Cup, right? Yeah, Cancer Cup. Like, she beat Cancer. She folded over her knee and folded all of you along with it, right? And so what happened was, the longer the CM went, the more you saw of her. You also saw a frickin' metric frick ton of El Condor Pasas with 20 races or less, even in the finale. I ended up winning that finale, but at the same time, there was an El Condor Pasa that had a 100% win rate with 15 races. You gotta understand how crazy that is to show up to that. To show up to the finale in Group A, Open A, right? And say, you know what? I'm gonna win with this random Uma I just showed up with, right? That's crazy work. And then they almost got away with it too. That's how strong El Condor Pasa was. Why am I telling you this story? I'm telling you this story because that's not what freaking happened to Udori Cap. She freaking disappeared. You basically had some people who were running her as like an Oshi, right? Or like people like this person with the 75 races, like they were actually running a double dominator comp. And like what else is there to say? She just stopped showing up. She just wasn't there. Unlike with El Condor Pasa, I saw less and less of her as the CM went on. In day 1, round 1, she was present on every ticket, multiple times. But by day 2, round 2, I think I saw her like 3 or 4 times across across like the 40 races. Like, she just disappeared. Why is that? Well, I think there's actually a couple simple answers, right? Answer number 1, she's still a gacha character, right? She's not like El Condor Pasa, where like everyone has El Condor Pasa. Like, you can't play the game and not get El Condor Pasa. You're gonna get a 2-star eventually, right? And if you just pull for long enough, you're gonna have enough El Condor Pasa pulls to like have a 3-star El Condor Pasa, right? So you're going to have a good one eventually, right? But you might not have gotten a Christmas Zaguri. Like, especially at the timing that we have in Global, right? In Global, everything passes so fast, right? You don't really have a lot of time to pull on your Oshi. And yes, I do think she is a lot of people's Oshi, like, natively. She is like the star of Cinderella Grey after all. So I do think the Cinderella Grey star would be very present in people's heads, right? Even if they're like, oh no, I don't want meta or whatever, yeah. But so just because she's a gotcha, I feel like some people just weren't lucky enough to pull her. But a lot of other builds just look like this, right? When they have this really high wit that and 3 to 4 recoveries and still just had garbage chances of winning, right? If you go through all this work to have this really specific setup set up and then it just doesn't work out, well, I'm sorry to say, like, it's kind of upsetting, right? Imagine getting your Turf S, medium S, 1000 speed, 600 wit Uma, and then looking at the 68% win rate and going, dang, that's all my wins this CM. That would suck. It would suck really freaking hard. Especially because anytime that there's a triple frontrunner, your win rate goes from like the 80s or 90s down to like 55%. Because any random group of frontrunners can turn off Uma squared sometimes. Right? That's pretty tough. Yeah? And so, even though I do think she was strong, I do understand like why she stopped showing up like deeper in. Uh, by the way, I gotta talk about the love of my life, Wedding Airgroove, or just Airgroove in general. So, if y'all didn't know, Airgroove is like my Oshi Uma. She is one of the Uma that, like, if I have a choice at all, and I think she can be used in any capacity, I will try to bring in an Airgroove whenever I can, right? I just love running her. She's one of my favorite Uma actually, she is my favorite Uma by a wide margin, right? She's one of the few Uma that, like, I've drawn her without being paid to draw her. I love this Uma, yeah? And so, when I realized that she could do something very special this CM in my triple front comp, I was like, alright, bet. You might go, what do you mean? She's not a front runner natively. She's like front, like, G or something? Front E? And I go, well, yeah, but, like, who cares? You know this problem we talked about in the triple front comp? How it's like, wow, first to second place, turned off. First to second place, turned off. Third through fifth? Hey, wait a minute. Yeah, it turns out Eternal Moments is actually a great third frontrunner ability because it procs exactly when I want it to proc, when my Uma is behind in third through fifth place in the early race, or in the very start of the mid race. That is basically the exact timing I want this to be proccing, and it lets her do something very special. She gets to be a set of rocket boosters and activate dueling in an incredible way. Generally speaking, if she activated her ult, I did not lose. I actually can't remember a single time where I lost where Airgroove got her ult off. And not even because Airgroove herself won, but because what she did is she pushed the entire lobby incredibly far forward, just like if you ran a Runaway Suzuka. But unlike a Runaway Suzuka, she never ran the risk of accidentally turning off angling and steaming for my real aces, right? She always did a fantastic job of being a booster, and hey, sometimes she won, which is incredible, right? Like, she just is so good at being the third front that can sometimes fight for position all the way back from fifth and snipe the pole position away from other fighting fronts. She was incredible for this really niche role that I don't think would ever show up in Graded, let's be fair. It was very cool. I'm very proud of myself for finding the tech, and I'm very proud of my Airgroove for making that tech work. Speaking of Suzuka and weird techs, hey, you know what? I talked a little bit about I've lost to Sand Sky, I've lost to Tumble Cross. You know who else I lost to? Runaways. I'm not kidding. It turns out this track was exactly short enough that with Swinging Maestro, Runaway Suzuka could pull out wins. They were kind of fire. I'm not gonna lie. What people would do, they would run either their Oshi or Crystal Suguri, and then they run a Dominaire, and I'm pretty sure the only point of the Runaway in their builds was to stop people from getting first place on their random frontrunners, like, literally just turning off Sand Sky. I'm pretty sure that was her point. But it turned out, if you just gave your Runaway Swinging Maestro and had enough base stamina, she could just win sometimes. You could enact the full Runaway Suzuka fantasy in Open for once. And the thing is, this took sauce and balls, okay? This is a hard Uma to build in Open, okay? You gotta win all those races in a row, and then you also you basically have to do it in Unity Cup, right? And then you also have to do all sorts of other jank nonsense, like you have to figure out how to squeeze her points value underneath. It's such a cool build that people slapped together, and I'm so impressed by the people that did this. It was very fun. Now, her win rate individually wasn't particularly good, and the win rate as a team wasn't super different from like a double Dominator win rate. But as I mentioned before, double Dominator was the dominant like setup this CM. So getting that far is really freaking cool in my eyes. Okay, I think this was really sick. Now talk about things that were kind of sick, but I didn't see them. Triple Dominator. I don't know where they went. The whole idea of this build is actually pretty simple to execute. It is just like, hey, I have late surgers, they have Dominator, I'm going to win, right? Like, it was just the triple late surger comp, but with 3 Dominators, and there were 3 very good Uma to run it with, one of which is a 2-star. Which I think I kind of answered my own question. Why didn't I see it? Well, because it takes a lot of carrots to run this, right? You had to have pulled on Ice and Flash, which is already pretty rare, or Ice and Flash Valentine rather, and then you also had to pull on Rudolph, which you probably didn't have the carrots for when she was like a banner Uma, right? So the number of ways you could run this is actually really narrow, right? It's not actually that weird when I think about it, but I do feel kind of sad that like there was just no representation for this strategy at all. It just makes me super duper sad. So what's our conclusion overall? I'm going to miss Open B. The meta is dynamic in ways that just don't exist in graded, at least in part because there's like, it's really just me, like, doing my cook and having my fun down here. But I will say, don't let your means be dreams regardless. Experiment, try stuff out, and be humble about what you see. Humility is really good for you. Don't just follow what the people in graded say. Try and interpret what's happening in front of you. Because remember, it wasn't Crystal Zaguri that was super powerful, it was the Dominators. Remember that for next CM. In Taurus Cup, respect the Dominators. Till then, be safe, good luck, see y'all later. I'll be putting out the video for the Taurus, couple of days. I still need to make it still, but like honestly, every CM is a little bit of like, I need to do some testing, and the testing for the CM is not complete. So, give me a few more days to cook, and I'll get back to y'all on that. Later!